So let's
Okay.
just let's just start from the beginning. How did you get into wrestling? Like, were you a fan growing up? Did you come to it late?
Yeah.
How did you start?
No, I think on my fourth or fifth birthday, my uncle bought me the old school WWF blue ring with like six action figures,
Love
and
it.
I loved playing with that. And then caught it on Saturday mornings. I'd religiously watch Saturday morning cartoons from 7 a.m. and by noon, you had I believe WWF Superstars for an hour or like a rerun, whatever it was,
Right.
and I'd always watch that. So um, didn't think I'd become a wrestler. I was too small, or it was unrealistic, or I can't relocate to Florida or the WWF development or
Right.
whatever it was. And when I was 1920, I noted there was a wrestling show that was in town as an independent show, and decided to buy tickets and catch it. And I noticed there was a wrestling school affiliated with it, and that kind of blew my mind that there was a wrestling school in Toronto. And
Mm-hmm.
for someone who never thought he had a chance to do it, or it was unrealistic, suddenly the possibility of driving 30 minutes or 60 minutes to go train and live like my obsession as a dream became like a possibility. And at that point, I was like, all right, you know what? I got to give this a shot. So saved up a little money, went and trained for year, start after year, started doing some shows through my wrestling school. By a year and a half, I was doing more shows outside of the school and continued training throughout my first 2 years there. And that kind of started a big ripple effect that has been the past decade of my life.
So being a smaller guy, like you said, because WWE back then was a big man's world. Was there anyone in particular that you looked at as someone where you could go, okay, I could do this?
Um, the guys I liked, mind you, some of them weren't the biggest guys in comparison to the WWF roster or whatever, but I never looked at someone because I can relate to as, hey, that guy's an underdog like me or a smaller guy. It was the guys that I looked up to just were the guys that captivated me.
Right.
When I was 4 and 5, and I'd see the guys on TV, it'd be the guys that I had the action figures out, those
Right.
six action figures. I forgot all of them, but I know there was Hogan, Piper, Hacksaw, Jim Duggan, Big Bossman. So like, and Piper ended up being the guy that captivated me as a child, and for whatever reason, I didn't understand who was a good guy, bad guy. I just know he
Right.
was loud and crazy and wild, and it was amazing to me. But once I hit 6, 7, and I was just watching it religiously from 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Shawn Michaels was the man back then, and as a child, the top baby faces like the Shawn Michaels and Bret Harts are the people kids probably gravitate to. And despite being a Canadian, I gravitated to Shawn Michaels.
Oh.
That was my guy as a kid, and then as I got older and I was a teenager, I started gravitating to the Chris Jericho's, the Eddie Guerrero's, the Kurt Angles, and that path continued as I got older. And then once I started training and getting older, then there's other guys now that you're much more savvy about what's out there internationally that you got into. But yeah, I mean, by default, a Shawn Michaels or a Chris Jericho or Eddie Guerrero or Kurt Angle aren't necessarily your 6'6", 6'9" guys.
Right.
They're all cruiserweights or the smaller heavyweights. But there was a certain presence and charisma level, and I'd like to believe they were all also reputable wrestlers in the ring. It just brought a nice combination of elite athletes with elite showmanship, and it wasn't much to do with size. It was just these guys were like just awe-inspiring, larger-than-life guys to me.
Right. So when you started training, did you have any doubts? Were there any moments where you kind of second guessed yourself, or was it just full steam ahead?
No, I mean, trying to be as humble as I can. I was really good at it in training. Obviously, whether you were going to make it in the land of the giants like a WWE or you get a contract with it, that's up for debate. That's not always. Sometimes it's right time, right place. But as far as whether I could do it when it came to training and getting shots at some of the independent shows, I had the confidence because despite going into training not being, I mean, my whole life I was an athlete, but the reality is I was just your average looking guy because I was always relatively accomplished as an athlete without the nutrition and the, weight training and all that. As a teenager, I just still eat burgers and hot dogs. So when I went to training, I didn't look like anything special. I wasn't that kid who just looked like a star athlete in high school and whatnot.
Was
But
there
despite that, my conditioning was as good as anyone, and my drive to not quit when we were doing 500 squats or 50 laps was as good as anyone. And most importantly, when it came to doing the wrestling drills, whether it was hitting the ropes, hitting body slams, being a cruiserweight, being technical, I'd pick it up relatively quick, and there was a comfort zone with all that.
so was there one match or moment early on in your career that kind of gave you that confidence, or did you just have it from the start?
I had the confidence from the start. I mean, sure, there's defining moments, whether it's in training or even my first match, just being really good and being really special. And there's always key points in my career over 10 years, 11 years or whatever that you're like, all right, you were hailed as like one of the rookies of the year. You were one of the standouts or the standout out of your wrestling school. And eventually, this is a tough promotion to crack, and you got on, and eventually having, top veterans or top producers and companies who are on TV call you special or say, you got it, or stuff to that nature. Getting the respect of certain peers who are very accomplished and well known when you wrestle them or they watch you. There's always those key moments. I think they stand out a little more in your first few years because your career is shorter, and those opportunities are a little. There's a little. You're afraid that those moments, those defining moments, are much less because you're just a year or two in. But after a decade, there's, again, humbly speaking, a lot of them, and not that they're a blur, but it's once you get to a certain point and you hold yourself to a certain standard, you kind of expect that kind of quality output out of yourself on a regular basis.
So as you said, at this point in your career, 10, 11 years later, do you have one sort of ultimate goal, or is it just, do you just want to do what you love type thing?
My career and my goal is really redirected halfway through my career, or just before halfway. About 4 to 5 years in, I started running some events, just 1 or 2 events as charity events, just out of passion, and then I took a real knack. I had a real knack for it, and I really had an enjoyment on that front of on that aspect of the business. And soon after, that became something that I had a passion for, and I started my own company. I believe roughly 6.5, maybe 7 years ago. Smash Wrestling, and that's where I've kind of been juggling the two.
Right.
And it's really hard to go 110% on both fronts. It's near impossible. I like to think the wrestler in me is still accomplished. I mean, I still wrestle and compete for the elite companies here in Ontario and Quebec and in the Maritimes, and I have some high quality tour opportunities coming out of Germany and the UK. So
Nice.
I've had some good looks from some contracted companies. So I'd like to believe that I'm still doing well, but my ultimate goal has always been to get my company to the highest point possible, and it's been a quite respectable journey so far. Smash Wrestling is considered by many to be the premier organization in Canada. We were the first Canadian company to land a deal with Fight Network on national and international TV front. We've expanded into many markets, being a company that's an independent company would typically run in one market, but we've had the privilege of succeeding in numerous markets, and we're continuing to expand on that. And there's some short-term and long-term goals we have as a company. So for me, now I'm a family man with 2 kids. I certainly don't turn down the opportunity to land a contract with a major company.
Right.
But my ultimate goal resides in trying to find the best balance between being a promoter and a wrestler, and continuing going down the path where I can continue to make a living off professional wrestling. And that's what I've been blessed to do for the past 5 years, where I can still compete on a lighter or heavier schedule to my choosing, and work that around the schedule for my company with Smash Wrestling. And if I can continue to do that on an even larger scale, where I can hopefully work with a contract company and still balance that while taking Smash Wrestling to where it needs to be on a national front, that's as good as it gets for me. It still allows me to be my own boss and have a little control over my future in my career.
So when you look at the wrestling world and the promoting world, how big is that difference, or is there much of a difference?
It is different. I mean, for me, I have a unique perspective because I am a wrestler and a promoter.
Right.
I do think sometimes promoters don't fully understand the wrestler's point of view, or all the values or ways to optimize using the wrestler, because they're not in their shoes, and vice versa. Wrestlers don't always get the optics and all the challenges that a promoter faces, and I'd like to understand that I believe that I have a nice balance of the two, which has helped me on a professional level on both fronts. It's also helped me build a better rapport with people on both fronts. But I do think perhaps someone else who wouldn't be as familiar, if they were strictly a promoter trying to dip into a wrestler's shoes, or vice versa, being new to it, it would be a bit of a challenge and an adjustment initially.
You mentioned the Fight Network deal, and of course you've collaborated with Impact. What did that do for you professionally and even personally?
Definitely opened a lot of doors. We do have, we were always a company that did a lot of cross promotional efforts with companies from the UK and Germany and China and US, and with Impact Wrestling, obviously. And now there's more opportunities on the horizon in 2020, and a lot of that, I believe, is because we've built a reputation for being cross promotional platform that has good visibility, whether it's through our social media following, our online subscription model, and especially with the Fight Network programming. So, and I have a very great rapport with the people at Fight Network, and that's definitely helped us understand the production aspect of the industry quite well. I do believe we had always a bit of a better understanding than most independent companies on that front. We always valued that from day one, but getting to work with a large organization like Fight Network, and also kind of getting their feedback kind of allowed us, and to be honest, to kind of meet the standards that's expected, allowed us to kind of grow on that front.
Do you think those collaborations helped Smash become so big?
They do. I mean, there's a lot to it. It's an ongoing evolution of doing a bit of column A, B, C, and D. There's a lot that we've done that we can consider our key defining moments, like when we had AJ Styles, when he was released from Impact Wrestling, TNA back then. We were one of the first companies to have him on the independents, and we gave him his highest profile match that was out there amongst the select groups that had him. And we had Lance Storm, who was pretty much in semi-retirement, had a couple of matches for us. When we collaborated with Progress, to use that as an example, that collaboration was something that wasn't thought possible, since they were a very big UK company and this was their North American debut. There's always these key defining moments. So yeah, the collaboration is definitely brought something to the table where, there's a lot of quality organizations, promotions, and they do a lot of quality things. But I think we got to stand out with our collaborative efforts, and at least be one of the companies who were truly doing it on a fresh scale.
Do you think more companies should collaborate, especially the smaller ones?
If people are willing to be team players, you got to understand there's a bit of a give and a take. There's less roster spots for your roster.
Right.
Sometimes there has to be a little flexibility in understanding that you probably have to spend a little more with travel and potentially people's pay rates if they're from a more accomplished international organization. You have to understand that you have to protect people from that other organization just as much as you have to protect your own. Just really, that just comes down to planning ahead, really, to be honest. You build a rapport with the other group, see what's going to serve the best interests of both sides, find ways to be creative in getting exposure for the event online, in person for the live event, finding ways to optimize the buzz of the event. Is there a particular matchup or a way to promote the event that's just really going to stand out, or a particular platform? Maybe there's a particular city or weekend that's going to really help make all this stand out with a little more buzz. So it really takes it sounds like a dull answer, but preparation is a massive part of these collaborations to really get the most mileage out of it.
Now you've got a close relationship with Tyson Dux, who obviously has his own school. How much of an impact has his school had on your company and wrestling in Canada as a whole, do you think?
Tyson, from day one, has been one of the most, or if not the most, massive influence on my career as a wrestler and also as a promoter. When I was just a student, he was the man at my wrestling school's promotion, and he was a guy that, outside of my trainer, I got to pick his brain and get a lot of quality advice from him, just watch him in amazement. And he always found a soft spot for me and was very instrumental in my first few years, just taking me off to the side, giving me feedback, kind of encouraging me where I had strengths and being honest where I had weaknesses. And over time, when I started Smash Wrestling, he was really one of the foundations, one of the key pieces of the organization from day one. And since then, not only has he been a mentor, not has he only been one of the pillars of our organization, but he's one of my best friends now. And that's where it's just a natural fit for his wrestling school in London to be essentially an affiliate of Smash Wrestling. We laid our foundations in London before his school opened up, and that was always an aspiration of his to open up the school in London. And it kind of worked. It made sense. It's he's running the school. It's his kids, but because of our close relationship, it just feels like a direct relationship where a lot of those kids they feel like my students too, just because that's my mentor, that's my best friend, and just a natural fit. Those kids, for them to wrestle for Smash Wrestling, it feels like the home team. And for me, wanting to invest in those kids is just as important as investing in students of my own if I had a school.
Right. When it comes to Smash Wrestling and your promoter career, what's your ultimate goal when it comes to Smash Wrestling, you being a promoter side?
Again, just to take it on as large a scale possible. Nowadays, that entails more than just, on TV, getting on Fight Network was a really big one, because it's just not like, let's say, getting on a local TV channel that's big but doesn't have sports or wrestling in particular. The Fight Network is specifically dedicated to combat sports. It has a base in Canada. It has coverage internationally, and getting on that platform is almost as big as it could get for us. So continuing down that path, which if we have the biggest visibility via television, biggest visibility via digital platforms, airing our product online, and doing the same with live events and continuing our efforts with our expansion, it can't be a one-worded answer, because it's really just continuing an expansion effort geographically, digitally, and on television, just on all fronts.
So just to finish things off, you've got 2 shows coming up, one on February 7th and one on February 23rd. Is there anything you want to say about those 2 events? We've definitely taken a fresh approach to
our rosters for those events. So we're definitely bringing in some fresh faces. We're definitely investing in our future as well. With the February 23rd event, you're going to see some American wrestlers that are going to debut with us who already have a bit of buzz and quite frankly are going to be some top performers on the North American indie scene in the years to come. And at the same time, you have a lot of the top stars of the Wrestle Factory who truly aren't considered students anymore. They're well polished. They're hungry. They're getting out there, and we get to showcase some of those kids as well now. And they, the second that bell rings, they're not students or recent grads anymore. They're Smash Wrestling alumni and not alumni, sorry, but they're Smash Wrestling roster members.
Right.
And it's just exciting to see that we can offer something fresh to our audiences and something that's considered a high caliber professional wrestling.
Well, that's all the questions I have. Is there anything else you want to add, or?
No, just, if people haven't given us a shot before, or people think their friends haven't given us a shot before, I've always subscribed to, putting all the confidence in our crew, and if you make it out to one show, you'll be hooked. So if anyone's reading this, definitely give us an opportunity, and it'll probably be one of the best decisions you make, to be honest.
For sure. Well, thank you for the time.
Likewise. Take care.
All right, bye.